So we looked at other alternatives, and one of those alternatives was looking at the foregone amount, and we'll talk about that in a few moments, as well as whether interfund borrowing or interfund investment is a better term in order to meet that obligation. So on July 14th of 2014 was our budget workshop for the FY 2015 budget. At that time, the proposal was budgetized, if you were, was included in the FY 2015 budget as a proposal. So the proposal was laid out, $2.5 million. That was to match the $2.5 million of the other sponsor, the City of Pullman, and we proposed that we could pay that in $500,000 increments in 5 successive fiscal years, and that those increments would be subject to annual appropriation. In other words, the council every year in the budget process, when it passes its annual appropriation ordinance, in this case, this year it'll be August 15th, the public hearing on the budget will occur. The council, by passing that appropriation, authorizes the next $500,000 increment to be paid. So the combination comes from foregone amount, which foregone amount essentially means that Idaho state law allows a government to levy property taxes no greater than 3% increase from the previous year's levy, or in our case, the previous year's, well, it is a levy. It's our property tax levy. So 3% is the maximum. However, Moscow was very frugal in the 90s and in the early 2000s, and we amassed a foregone amount, meaning that property taxes were authorized up to 3% of those years, but they were not taken. There were some years that no property tax was increased. We were witnessing enough growth and new construction, which increased our tax base without levying new taxes. And then what happens is any foregone amount or any amount of taxes authorized but not taken are banked, and the State Tax Commission will essentially keep an accounting of those, and at any time the City Council can authorize taking those foregone taxes. And the purpose for that, of course, is that if, of course, you want to be as frugal as possible. However, if those foregone taxes were to be cleaned out or not authorized after the budget year, then perhaps some councils or county commissions would take those taxes no matter what, so they didn't lose them. So for our purposes in the state of Idaho, there is a foregone amount you can go back and tap. At the time, our foregone amount was just short of $500,000. So compare that to 3% of the city's levy up till that time and continuing on till now is anywhere, depending upon the new construction and annexation from the previous years, averages right around $120,000 to $125,000. So there was significant funding in that foregone amount. Interestingly enough, in that year, the foregone amount was taken for 2 purposes. One was for the financing for the airport, and I'll show you how all that works out here in a moment. The other was for, I believe it was $153,000. The foregone amount was taken to continue payment for, or excuse me, authorization for 2 police officers that we had hired pursuant to a COPS grant. So that paid their salaries for 3 years. At the end of 3 years, it becomes then a local responsibility. So the council authorized both of those to tap the foregone amount. So we developed there in our non-departmental line item, airport development, there was an amount of $500,000 in that line item, and that was continuing until the, I say obligation, until the council's commitment was finished. So how did that come out? On August 18th, we had a public hearing on the 2015 budget. Again, that discussion was had, council discussed it, and the budget, the annual appropriation ordinance was passed. On July 6th of 2015, council passed resolution 2015-13, which essentially authorized the finance director to make interfund investments for the purpose of meeting those obligations for that match for the runway realignment project. So that, even though it was included in the budget, the vehicle for obtaining those funds, at least the interfund investment, continued and needed to be done by resolution. On July 13th of 2015, again, it was a line item in the FY 2016 budget of $500,000. And then on August 3rd, 2015, Council passed Resolution 2013-17, or 2015-17, excuse me, which authorized that the funds be paid to the City of Pullman, who was the financial agent for the airport, fiscal agent, and that those funds could only be used for airport purposes and the runway realignment project and for no other purpose. Okay, what will happen in the future? July 11, 2016 is our scheduled budget workshop. It'll occur in this room, and it again is proposed at $500,000 for the third installment of that $2.5 million, and then I've gone out to 2017 and 2018. So
let me throw a couple of things in here, Gary. So this is our third time, right here. It's coming up, and this is going to be ongoing for 2 more years after this. This will be the last one, correct, Gary?
Yes, sir.
And so this was something that we talked about 2 years ago. So we're kind of, once we get by this, we'll be at the halfway point, roughly.
3/5 done.
Yep.
Okay, so this was the original proposal that, it's not quite the original proposal. The original proposal had, this is the foregone tax amount that council authorized in the budget itself. In the original proposal that Don proposed, that was $228,000. I can't, for the life of me, recall why it's now $216,705, about $11,270 difference. But what is in the budget at this point is the $216,705. So as you can see, it's 11 years. 10 years of payback for the project, and by 2025, you've got the amount of money that is in foregone amount, and then you have these amounts are the funds that are borrowed or invested from different funds.
And notice this number right here. This is the amount of the loan value, this $1.14262 million. And the reason I'm talking about some things here, because a lot of folks, there's 2 things that some people don't understand real well, and that's business and finance. So we're going to talk about some of the stuff is boring stuff because it's numbers, and some people just don't get it. And so we're trying to help people through this, and we take all the time we need to explain it. But this is the borrowed amount right here, not $2.5 million. This right here, right, Gary?
Yes.
Okay.
The amount of money that you see across the top, the property tax foregone amount, those are property taxes that are paid directly into that line item and then are paid over for the obligation. So the debt amount is down here. And as the mayor pointed out, that number is the maximum debt amount. So that was the original proposal on July 7th, 2014. Again, the only difference is that $216,705 as opposed to $228. So this is essentially the meat of the program. This is the current finance structure. There was a 2.5% interest rate, which we have been utilizing. We will talk a little bit about whether that is an interest rate that should be utilized. Council's free to change it at any time. But you've got 2015. In 2015, as I explained a few moments ago, the 2015 budget authorized the payment of the $500,000. That payment was not made until 2 months before the expiration of the 2015 budget in August of 2015. At that point, we were winding down the budget year, and the amount was financed without borrowing from any of the funds that had been proposed in Don's memo. Those were paid with general fund monies. So it was funding that had been was not line items that were not expended. It's fund balance carryover, so that was funded through the general fund itself. In 2016 is when the second payment would come due, or increment, if you will. So utilizing that, the proposal is we have a payroll service fund, which is comprised, it's an accumulation of funds for paid leave, essentially. So paid leave that employees have accrued. So it's utilized, it's a fairly large number in the general fund, and that number right now is around $522,000. It averages somewhere around $454,000. So there's no reason to believe that an investment of a period of 4 years, and you'll see payroll here and payroll here. So if the funding is utilized in this budget year, and that payment has not been paid yet, so when it is paid, then interest will begin to accumulate. That will be paid back in FY 2020.